G'day guys, and welcome to a preview for Rosehill on the 29th of July. Rail goes back to the true, and it should be a firm track and a firm winner's track at that. Usually you want to get a couple off in the straight, but I don't see it being a big drama tomorrow considering how firm it should be. Possibly, it's just the normal Rosehill where you want to be saving ground and getting a couple off in the straight. Hard to come wide from back and sustain a run and win. First race of the day, 2-year-olds, 1500 metres. Two quick replays to show here. This horse, So You Think, Colt on debut, had trialled up well prior to this. Beats a very heavily back favourite from the Snowden Yard. Softish tempo, comes from behind. They get home quick, and this horse looks to only be winding up on the line. It's the grey horse here. You'll see it cops a pretty nasty check not long after the start. Right about now, sneaking up inside, so it cops that bad check. Not an easy thing for a horse having its first start to overcome a check like that and maintain its composure. Not a lot happens from this point. See, this sort of gets a little bit out sprinted at the top of the straight here, but really starts to find the line. See it get onto its right leg there and really get into its work. The second horse is getting away from the rest. The third horse is a good effort. And see through the line even. This horse he's pricked, and this looks like it's a nice horse. It's definitely the horse to beat here. Gets Bowman, 1500 jumping from 12 there. He's a slight query for a horse, for a 2-year-old. But does look up to it. Does look to get a genuine tempo here from the two Waterhouse runners coming across in Regal Cannon and Runaway. Almighty, I doubt, will be putting too much pressure on them. I'd say they'll control the tempo. Hosu Meraki will probably be forced well out of it, and that gives D'Argento the jump on it. It'll try and hold a position somewhere midfield, I would imagine. I think the danger in the race is this horse All Too Soon. Missed the start its first start and ran home well against a slow tempo. Then last start, we'll see. Pardon me. Ends up out the back again. Third, this is it here. Out of a nice horse in Gallant Tess, who was a nice miler. Sort of midfield. Gets shuffled back even further, then has to take off wide. Well, a long way out, and see it sort of even wider here. This is the day the fence was good, and it's even forced even wider. It just keeps coming. It's an enormous effort here. I think it's an each way bet to nothing tomorrow. I can't see it unless they walk, which I can't really see happening either. Incredible effort for it to get that close. Should have definitely won that race, and won that race clearly. The 1500's obviously going to be no issue. That was 1550, and now it drops back to the 1500. It should be strong here. Key rider change, drops a bit of weight too, and sorry, same weight, 53.5, but gets the key rider change, and definitely looks like it will be strong late. Is drawn a little bit awkwardly, but possibly could find the back of D'Argento with any luck, and if it takes a long way into the race, it can be finishing over the top of it for mine. So $10 each way looks a big price. All Too Soon. D'Argento around the even money mark. Obviously no value now after they bet around $3.50, $4, something like that early in betting. They're the only two I can really see fighting the finish out here, unless it's a crazy tempo or bias that we're sort of unaware of at this stage. I really think it looks a bit of a two-horse war between them. Race 2. Matt, sort of a bit of a key here. Clear the Beach does look the leader. Wider Claim's the one that is a bit scary. If it jumps and Panya gets a bit itchy fingers early and decides to drive, that could change the complexion of the race. Wider Claims definitely looks a better horse when it leads, but I doubt that it will lead here, and if it does, it could ruin the chances of Clear the Beach and itself. But that's still looks a little bit unlikely for mine. I think Clear the Beach is just a faster horse. Quantrill's trialled up well and looks to find a nice position. $11 looks a decent price. Parker's Place, first start for Chris Lees, looks to have only tried fairly for mine, and I'd prefer to watch it unless it's heavily backed. Akasaki goes up in distance after having every possible chance last start. Rockefeller's the query horse of the race, first up for 332 days. Its trials have just been, pretty solid. It has had 3 trials. It looks to get well back here, and depending on the pattern, 1100 metres at Rosehill is one of the toughest places to come from back and wide and win, so it'll have to put up a huge performance, I'd say, and difficult to get is the one that probably rolls forward outside the leader if there isn't a mad charge from sort of Wider Claim and Akasaki early. So I think there's 2 schools of thought here. Clear the Beach leads comfortably and wins, or there's a bit of a charge of the Light Brigade which brings in the likes of Quantrill and possibly Rockefeller first up, but I'd be still a little bit worried about Rockefeller. Another one to watch probably in betting. If it's nice and firm late, it's probably worth saving on, but that'll be the only thing. I think for me, I'd happy to have a decent shot at Clear the Beach here. I think back to 1100 metres and leading should suit it. And Quantrill's an interesting runner at about the 10 to 1 mark, who has trialled well and should find a little bit of a position just in front of Rockefeller. The other reason to like Rockefeller a little bit is, well, hopefully it gets out around the $5 mark at least, but if they do kick up and say Clear the Beach leads and has to fend off either Wider Claim, Akasaki, and difficult to get, could easily be trapped 3 wide. Rockefeller could end up on the back of it, and that's when it could be very dangerous. If it's only sort of 2 or 3 lengths off and with a 3 wide trail, it automatically becomes the horse to beat, especially if there's a bit of pressure. So, interesting race with a few different plays. I think you run the race 10 times, Clear the Beach is definitely the horse to beat, but there are a few different ways the race could play out. Race 3 in another race that is similar to race 2 in that there do look a couple of ways the race could pan out. Albeit Sam will be desperate to lead back in distance. It's not always easy to do that, but it is a pretty fast horse. I'm sure having that 1800 metre race under its belt, the tactics will be to make it a staying test and really want to stretch these horses out. I think that's against Insensata, which is an interesting thing to say. Usually, considering it sprinted off a slow tempo last start against a bit of a bias and was way too good for horses, I just think that continued fast tempo and pressure, if Timmy Clark gets it right, will probably drag the sprint out of Insensata a little bit, which we've seen before off a fast tempo. It just didn't have that turn of foot. Could be wrong, as it could have just been getting fitter there and maybe absolutely flying now and could just easily charge over the top of them again. But I just think that's a little bit of a risk, the fast tempo. Cosmic Engine, I think this is a step up and really needs to lift. It could have been flat last time, and 21 days to get over that last one. It probably gives him a chance of improving a little bit. The Pharaoh's got a tough job here. Does look like it lobs outside the leader unless Star Monsoon presses forward to give it cover, which looks unlikely. I don't think it's fast enough to get there, to tell you the truth. And this does look harder than last start for the Pharaoh, even though it did run good time, and it's just going to be a hard spot to sit outside this leader over 1400, I would imagine. And then Reach for Heaven's the one that does look like the big improver. Good first up, then plenty against last time. It charged through the line first up over the 12, then out to the 1250 behind Awoken, and then Pharaoh was the widest runner there, and does look the improver on the inside. Whether it ends up third the fence or 3 back, I don't think that's too big an issue as long as Bowman sort of sneaks through and and gets a bit of clear running. I can see a few tired horses and them breaking up here, so I don't think it'll be held up, touch wood. And around the 9 to 2 mark for it does look generous enough. I think it's the horse to beat. I think Albeit Sam's flying and will give a huge sight. Gay Waterhouse back in distance is not normally a key sort of play, but it does look like the horse is absolutely flying. And Janot does look a bit of a horse that could sneak back on the rails, sneak runs and run a place at odds. Real knockout chance for the win, but more a place chance at around the 33 to 1 mark. Race 4 Highway, not a race I want to spend too much time on. I'm normally a fan of the highways, but this one looks really ugly. Nix Vendetta's getting deep into its prep. It had a little bit of a break there in between runs at one stage, but it just raced a bit flat for mine last start, and now shows up on the 7-day back up in trip. It's hard to get too excited about it, but it does look the default horse you keep coming back to. Point Percy's 20 days since it ran on a heavy track first up and battled away. I like that it's at least 20 days, but it's now going up in trip and back on a dry track. Hard to line it up, but definitely can't put a pen through it. Prada Miss was good first up in a bit of a little feature $50,000 race, I believe it was, at Grafton over there. Carnival had every chance there, but not an easy task first up, and just got a little bit out sprinted. 13 Gates, the worry for it, gets Bowman, but does look like a leading contender here with any luck. A horse I do have some time for in my Tagason is probably the horse to beat for mine. Got on the heavy track last start and battled away okay, definitely had its chance, but was a fast run race considering the conditions of the day, and back on top of the ground does look suitable. If you go back to the run it's going second up behind Estic Raj and this McPhee Lass, I think it wins on that run. I'm a little bit dubious about what happened since then. 5 weeks between, then 3 weeks between, and now it shows up here on the 3 weeks between again. I'm not sure if the horse has niggling issues or not, but I just think I've got it marked favourite, and it's around the $7.50 mark, and if I was to have a play in the race, it would be it. Honey Bad Girl down the bottom's an interesting horse, never been out to this sort of distance range. Copped a bad check last start behind a flying horse in Barricades and should have finished closer. Can't put the line through her down in the weights, down in the low, with the low draw here, just drawn to lob in behind the speed in a pretty weird looking race where it's very easy to say that, you know, most of these aren't at the peak of their powers, and it could just be in the right place at the right time at 20 to 1. So summing that race up, to my Tagason, something small with very little confidence, but I've probably got it marked more closer to the $5 mark than the $7.50 mark, whereas the rest are all pretty priced accordingly. Race 5. Looks to be good pressure on here, and a race that I don't mind the look of, but have some niggling doubts in the back of my mind about the horses I'm going to find. In saying that, they do look well suited. So going from the top, Alluvian was a big run first up, big query on it. Second up, going up in distance to the 1200 wide draw, 61 kilos. On that run alone, you've got to give it some hope, and it is $21, $23 best around. But I really think next start out for Alluvian, but it looks to have come back really well. Fate's Encore I thought had its chance first up, but can improve. Now goes to stays at the 12, goes up in distance, back in class, and does find a race with a nice bit of pressure and can run well. Suspenders is a horse I've settled on as my top pick. I really thought it's been building towards something. Maybe it was just a little bit soft its first couple of runs back. This Brad Widdop stable's going exceptionally well. Christian Reese riding their horse as well. Looks to be drawn ideally to lob into a really solid challenging position and should get a good crack at them in the straight here, and does look to peak fitness wise. Slumber Party, drawn gate 1, has a bit of pressure coming across outside, so probably will have to work to kick up and hold the front if that's the desired position. I'm not sure that that's ideal for her, especially 6 weeks between runs. the stable's the right stable to be producing a horse 6 weeks between runs fit, but still not an easy task. Second steps up to 1200. 3 weeks between runs can be on the up and can probably cross if they choose to put the pedal down early, and that could be the key to her chances. Vienna Romance probably gets back and wide here. I'm not in love with the rider from those sort of positions, and it does look a risk at a strong 1200, so I'm looking to bet around it. I thought Lady Chowfront was an interesting horse with a big positive rider change, and looks to box seat here from an inside gate. Can run a big race at 40 to 1 or something. I think I saw it 50 to 1. It does look over the odds. Firen gets Bowman, which is quite interesting, coming off a Gosford maiden win. That was a very, very average maiden, but did it easily and did look to have upside. Does need to improve significantly to measure up to a few of these best, but can't pen the horse. I'm Imogen. I've seen it at Gosford as well. It'll be interesting to see which way they go there. A much softer option. Gosford drawn a nicer gate. If they come here, it's drawn 12, probably injects even further in speed into the race, and will run a positive race. The horse is airborne, there's no doubt about it. And it's won a few races and knows how to win. It's just that 950 up to 1200 is the little query, but it's had 3 runs back and should be able to handle it from a strength fitness point of view. Pandea's drawn awkwardly, funny rider change. 1200 metres is a risk for mine, and I'll be risking it. And Miss Parkins, coming from that Grafton Carnival as well, has a bit of pace, but huge class rise, and does look well found around the $9 mark in early markets. I'd have it marked a bit longer than that. So for me, I think suspenders around the $8 mark with scratching of Erythea looks a good play. I think each way it if you're having one bet. Otherwise, I'd have a little bit more confident go on it and possibly be saving on Face Encore and a little knockout go on Lady Chowfront at the 50s. I think that's a huge price. At $12 a place with Sportsbet looks a big price as well. It's a funny little race. Race 6. No speed in this race, which is interesting. Vaucluse Bay comes up a really short price favourite after sort of winning Lotto last start, being in the right place at the right time. All the other horses got softened and it grabbed the leader that kicked away in RB at Sam. They did run good time, and I can understand why they've put it up short, because it does look like the key lead up, and it does look to find the same sort of position again. I just think this race might be a little bit deeper, and I definitely can't chime into it at 6 to 4 after it's won at sort of 10 or 12 to 1. It was heavily backed in from about 20s there, but just looks like a horse that needs things to go right to win races. Life O'Brien looks to lob in a good position naturally here. Comes off a fast run race last start where it just couldn't get close enough chimed in, and just maybe beaten by a couple of better horses there. Does look to find the spot it likes a little bit closer to the speed here, and can kick on and run well around the $7 mark. Looks generous. I thought Magical Stance could roll forward from gate 10. A bit indecisive last time. If they just choose to just press here and 4 weeks between runs up in trip, it can run a really positive race at around the 10 to 1 mark. Zorkan's 7 weeks between runs. Draws a little bit awkwardly to give away a start, and will need a good effort. There's a few horses here in Costaline, Vassal, Zorkan, all from the Gulwala stable that I'll be watching the betting very closely with late. I think whichever one supported, I'll definitely be having something on. And then we're talking Zayam, who does look an improver. Just not sure it's going its best, but does look well placed at 25 to 1 to find a good position here, somewhere close to the speed. And that's about it. It's a bit of a funny race. I think the play is Life O'Brien and Magical Stance, and then wait till late to see which Waller runners are well backed, and possibly at least save on whichever one's the best back runner. But I have to bet in the race, probably simply because Vaucluse Bay's come up $2.50, $2.70, and I can't really justify that. Race 7, the Winter Challenge. Classic Uniform finds a really soft lead here and is coming off two pretty strong efforts really. It's had absolutely no luck at both starts, wide and no cover last start, and battled on well after it ripped home against the pace and bias first up. I think it's going a lot better than it reads on paper and looks to find a soft lead here if that plays out that way, which sometimes it doesn't when it looks so obvious. But $8 looks huge value about it. Gold Symphony definitely finds the right position in behind the lead here, just off the pace probably. Had no luck last start and can improve. Snippet Slam, there's a lot of horses coming out of this similar race that just all had no luck or looked to be unlucky, and some of them can improve. I'm looking to bet around Snippets Land. I think there's centre pivot's going to be set too big a task. Shiraz for mine is not going well enough. Extensible similarly is not really hitting the line. Slightly Sweet obviously won a similar race to this last start, but now draws to get a similar run, and $14 looks fair enough. Again, I can't knock it. Leopari comes up favourite, draws wide, gives them a start, and looks to need a lot of luck, even though it is going well. Sultan Swing's the interesting other horse for mine, other than Classic Uniform, suited back on top of the ground. 5 weeks between runs is a bit of a query, but I don't think it's a big issue. Gets the junior rider to stay aboard, and that's probably the little issue. So if it pressed forward from 10, which it does have the pace to get outside the lead here, I could see these two sort of stacking them up and being very difficult to run down. If there is a bit of pace on it, opens the race up a bit more. Probably Gold Symphony is the one to run on most reliably, and Leopari down the outside late. But I really do think that Classic Uniform and Sultan Swing represent a bit of value here. Race 8. Ugly race pace-wise. Just no speed on paper really. You've got the sort of couple of query horses at Suspense coming wide. Zarabe, who looks to have lost its early speed, and Wild and Famous, the stablemate to Suspense, capable of going forward. And then I've never seen a race so devoid of pace. Mogador looks to kick up from that inside gate and probably holds a more challenging position with the blinkers reapplied. Can run a race. The horse I'm really interested in here is More to Gain. I just think it's just so much better than these horses. I think it's a group horse. Where it gets to in the run here is a nightmare. It's at first up for a 280-day break, but that lack of tempo may give it a chance to really power late over these. It just might be better than them. I think it's around the $7.50, $7 mark still, with Pick Me Up coming out, which is a shame. I wanted to bet against it, but More to Gain is clearly the best horse and most interesting. Wild and Famous gets up on the pace. 5 weeks between runs. It drives a big positive, but does usually find a horse better than it. I wanted to find Zarabe if it went forward, but it just seems to be going so average that it's hard to find it. Richard the First is a good roughie coming from the bush. Has trialled since a bit of a failure last start and can bounce back from a good draw. Most Exalted was a good first up win for the News Table. Again, draws awkwardly here, but should be strong late. It's a funny race, and for me, I'm having to have something on Suspense at $17, $19 is best around. I'm having to, because I just could lead from gate 12 and run a race. I think Mogador can box seat in $7.50, looks fair enough. I think that Ramoni form's good form for this, and More to Gain is just better than these for mine, and $7, $7.50 has to be taken as well. So they're the three I'll be playing, and it's a bit more of a default bet. I can't knock anyone for having something on Richard the First around the 30-1 mark either. Last race, and it doesn't get any easier. Girls Sunday box seats or leads from gate 1. A long time ago, draws 4 and comes across. Then you've got the 2 wide runners in Queen Misty and It's So Obvious. Look, the 2 that come across. It's So Obvious could easily get the 1-1 position here and can improve off its last start. I'd much prefer it 1 out than on the fence, and it can be fitter for that last start effort too, and looks well placed around the $12 mark. Long Time Ago is a pretty obvious horse to find. I think he went too slow on it last start and drops in weight up another 100 metres and got that run under its belt and can improve, no doubt. It's the one to catch. And the other two horses that do look pretty obvious are Philosophy and Awoke. Philosophy didn't have a lot of luck last start after a really solid win. First up, draws to get the right trail here. Needed a bit of luck at the right time, but can be strong. And Awoke had the ideal run last start, but they did run decent time, even though it was in the perfect spot everywhere. Interesting to see that Bowman chose Rustic Melody. I see now that Abdullah's on Awoke and Labdian. If they pull the Swifty and pull Abdullah off Awoke and put Bowman on and leave him on Labdian, that will be a crazy go, but it wouldn't surprise me. But I would suspect that Labdian's more chance of being scratched than Abdullah will stay on Awoke. Not many chances here, but nothing I really want to bet into. I could have a tiny bet on It's So Obvious around the $12 mark, and if I'm playing quaddies, I have to throw in Philosophy, Awoke, Long Time Ago, and It's So Obvious, and not much value there. But it just doesn't look a race of too many surprises. There's just looks a bit of a class gap between the first few and the rest. So. And that's including the setup. There's a few other horses that could be competitive if they had a little bit better barrier or going to look like they were going to find a bit better position, but the way it turns out, it looks like there's 4 main chances in running. So quite a few tough races, but there do look a few decent betting opportunities, and definitely will be betting. So thanks guys, and good luck.